There was once this valiant, mighty warrior named Saul. He was a young guy. He was in great shape. Men wanted to be like him. The women wanted to be with him. He was really popular. People sang songs about his conquest. And if we're a little honest, he was a little cocky about it. He loved the attention, and he was kind of self-centered. Now, Israel at that time, they were ruled by judges. If you had a problem, you took it to a judge. They'd hear your case. They'd decide which way it was going to go. The system worked. Everything was good. But Israel had these neighbors that all had kings, and like a jealous child, they said, I want one. Now God told them through the prophet, He said, no, you don't. No, you don't want one of these. Let me tell you what happens. You put all that power and authority in one guy, and men tend not to do well with that. They tend not to use that authority wisely. But Israel said, no, we want one. And in one of those great lessons of be careful what you wish for, God said, okay, I'll give you a king. So they get their national hero, the young, strong warrior that was so popular and a little cocky, named Saul. Saul reigns, and after a short while he disobeys God. And God sends word to him through the prophet, says, this kingdom, this throne, will be taken away from you. It's going to be handed to somebody else. Now I want you to think about a celebrity who's, let's say, maybe a pop star, a musician, a pop star, that's been told, hey, even though you're at your peak, or in your eyes you're at your peak, this is your last tour. Now how they might struggle to try to hold on to that cultural relevance. Think about maybe a politician who seems to be doing well, at least their own eyes, and they're told, all right, this is your last term, then you're out of here. What might they do to try to hold on to power? What might a person do to try to hold on to relevance, to keep their power, their authority, their popularity? Well, along comes this shepherd boy named David. He's young, he's handsome, he's in great shape. He slays a giant named Goliath. He becomes a national hero. People start to sing songs about him. Saul looks at this young guy named David and says, there's something about this guy that reminds me of myself. Can't think of what it is. Brings him into his household. Says, I want you to work for me. David becomes an attendant to Saul. And so, suddenly, there's this young, attractive guy in the house who is a lot like Saul in a lot of ways. Oh, and by the way, God tells David, you are going to be the one to take over this throne one day. Well, Saul knows that his days are numbered, but he just doesn't know what that number is. And his love of David starts to turn into a bitterness, starts to turn into jealousy. And Saul gradually becomes insane. But not to worry, because David, in addition to being handsome, young, great warrior, and popular with everybody, he's quite the musician. He's great at playing this instrument called the lyre. L-Y-R-E, not L-I-A-R. He's great at playing that instrument, and whenever he plays it, King Saul's fits just calm right down, at least at first. So, David, in addition to being a great asset to the nation, he's being a great asset to that family. Now, Saul has two daughters. The oldest one is named Merab, and the youngest one is named Michal. Now, I know there's the only other thing I can think of that's named Michal is a local seafood barbecue restaurant, so I'm not trying to make you starve, but that's how you pronounce her name. That'll come important later. So, Saul comes up with this idea. David is way too popular to just send him away. And he's way too popular for him to just kill him. Now, he sends him on dangerous missions. He says, I can't kill him, but let the Philistines do it. So he sends him on all these dangerous missions, thinking, well, he'll eventually get killed off. And David comes back victorious every time, and every time with all these victories, he becomes more and more popular. This just keeps backfiring. What's Saul going to do to manage this guy who has taken all the spotlight off of him, and is eventually going to take the throne? Saul comes up with an idea and says, I will get him to marry my oldest daughter, Merab. And David, he's not really interested in Merab. And he responds in humility. Now, whether this is humility or just a really good excuse, I'm not sure. But he says, I am just a lowly shepherd when I came to you. I'm a nobody. I can't marry into the royal line like that. So Merab gets married off to somebody else. But meanwhile, the youngest daughter who's still there, Michal, she is in love with David. And see, this is a really unusual passage. In 1 Samuel 18:20, it says that she loves David. You see, the way it normally is written in the Bible, it says there's this man that loves this woman, and he is pursuing this woman. But here, the princess says, oh no, I want that one. That's the one for me. And it was countercultural because women didn't have a lot of rights. Even as a princess, you didn't have a lot of rights, you didn't have a lot of power. For the princess to be like, oh no, I'm not waiting around for a suitor to find me. That's the guy right there. Get him in here. So she is bold in her declaration of her love for David. And at first her father, Saul, is happy about this. He says, hey, well, I couldn't get him to marry the oldest one. I'll get him to marry the youngest one. This is going to be great. He's going to marry my daughter. I'm going to be able to manage. I'm going to be able to control this guy once he gets into my household. But really, he's not happy for his daughter. Hey, she's fallen in love. She's found someone. And that's this great guy. No, he's happy because he's like, I've got him now. I've got him. So, back in those days, if you wanted to marry a woman, you had to pay the bride price. There was a hefty fee to be able to marry a woman. And David says, look, I came to you as a shepherd. I didn't come from money. I didn't have money. I didn't come from people with money. There's no way I can afford a bride price for a princess. I don't have Disney Magic Kingdom money. So Saul says, okay, I've got this idea. I've got this idea which will make it even. You bring me the foreskins of 100 Philistines. Now, without me getting too graphic, let's just go ahead and presume that getting the foreskins of 100 Philistines, you don't just walk up and ask them for those. That's going to take, you're going to have to kill that guy, okay? And so 100 of them, Saul is thinking, the odds are in my favor here. The odds be ever in my favor. That 1 out of 100 of these guys will be strong enough to kill somebody who's trying to do this to him. So, one of these guys surely can kill David. So 100, that's going to be kind of hard. 1 or 2, maybe. 100, that's going to be difficult. But David returns with this big bag of foreskins, brings home 200. What's Saul going to do? He's going to make good on his word. He says, okay, I guess you're marrying my daughter now. But then he comes up with an idea. He says, I will send some guards to go and kill my son-in-law in my daughter's bed. And you think about the dynamic of that, what does that do to his daughter? He's not really taking his daughter's needs into consideration at all, to put it lightly. But the guards come rushing in. Well, before they come rushing in, when they're on the way, Michal wakes up in the middle of the night with one of the greatest biblical examples of women's intuition. It's great. She wakes up, she knows something's going down. David, we got to get you out of here. There are guys on the way to come kill you. So she lowers him out of the window in a basket. And it makes me think of 2 things. Number 1, is this where we got the story of Rapunzel? It's going out the window, not with hair, but through a basket. Number 2, this woman's got remarkable forearm strength. I mean, just, I don't know, there's no mention of any pulleys. I'm just impressed by her. It's off topic, but I'm impressed by that. So she lowers him down in this basket. And then the guards come rushing in. And they don't see David. Where is David? We're reporting back to Saul. We can't find him. Saul comes busting in. And this great family dysfunction comes out of his mouth when he basically says, I can't believe when you had to choose between your father and your husband, you chose your husband. Well, yeah. It kind of shows how messed up he is in his mind that he thinks that she should still be clinging to her father instead of choosing her husband, who, by the way, God said would be the king at some point anyway. So, in those days, a woman was the property of her father until she became married, and then she was basically treated like property of her husband. I'm not saying it's right, I'm saying that's just the way it was. So, David has gone out the window, and now control of her falls back to her father. So we see this instance where we join Michal at the window She's standing there at the window. You know she probably does this every day. Stands at the window and looks off into the horizon and says, today will be the day my husband comes back. I love him. I proclaim it. I was bold in proclaiming it. Instead of striking me down, I got married. It's great. He loves me too. I know he does, even though the verses haven't said anything about him loving her. I know he loves me. He's going to come back for me, right? And here she is, waiting for her husband to come back. And now she's in control of a father who's pretty angry about what's happening. What's been happening up to this point and what's happening now. Now let's stop at this point in our story to talk a little bit about the dynamics in play in this family right now. And just think about some of the things that's happened. Her father has used her as a political pawn. Remember, Saul wasn't like, hey, my daughter's going to be so happy with this guy. She's marrying a good guy. I'm so happy for her. Let's put together a great banquet. No, he's saying, this is how I can get power over David. And some scholarly speculation seems to suggest that David might have been using her as well. Because remember, she talks about her love for him. It's never mentioned anywhere that he loves her back. And God has told David, you are going to be the one to take this throne. And so people believe that he says, well, marrying into the family line puts me one step closer. So this is a way to fulfill God's will. Maybe he loves her, we don't know. As we read on, doesn't seem to support that. But it seems like it might be political aspiration on his part that influences him to marry this girl. So she's been moved back and forth like a pawn by her father and by her new husband. And I wonder this morning how many of you can relate to that feeling. I wonder how many of you have ever just felt used. How many of you have ever felt like you got used by your family? How many of you have ever felt like you were just an inconvenience, you were a bother, you were in somebody's way, even if it was family, until they wanted something? And now all of a sudden you have some worth and some value, at least for a while, so they get whatever they want to from you, and then they cast you off to the side. We start that off as children, don't we? You've maybe seen this with your children, your grandchildren, and we've all done it when we were children, so you've been on one side of this or the other. When you come up to your parents, hug them on the leg, or you get up in their lap, you boast about the great things that you love about them, how their hair looks good today, and all of these things, and meanwhile it's, yeah, what do you want? You want my wallet, you want the car keys, what do you want? We've all done that. Co-workers do it, where they butter each other up before they stab each other in the back. Or maybe butter up the boss because you're wanting vacation time or you're wanting a promotion. Hey boss, is that a new car, man? You look great today. We've all done that, or we've at least seen it done. I wonder how many of you have ever poured out love for somebody and felt like all you got back was just being used up and thrown aside. But getting back to our story of Michal, we see her standing at that window, and she's waiting for her husband to come back. He loves me. I know he's coming back. But he never comes back for her. Oh, he comes back into town. You see, she has this brother named Jonathan, and they're best bros. He comes and hangs out with Jonathan. He's in town. He didn't come back for her. And I can just imagine the family gatherings. Wait, you ran into Dave the other day? Oh yeah, man, we went fishing. Was he coming back for me? And just imagine what that's like. Well, maybe he's just waiting to the right moment. I don't know. You see, what happens is David, when he leaves, he marries two other women named Abigail and Ahinoam. Over time, he adds 4 more women. So he has a little harem going of 6 women. And Michal is not in that group. She doesn't even get an honorable mention. She's just been left out. Now, it seems clear to everybody looking on, David has moved on. He's gotten remarried. He has moved on, and he has had no consideration for Michal. So under the culture and law of that day, control of Michal has fallen back to Saul. He says, well, I'm going to marry her off to somebody else. And she gets married to a guy named Pelatiel. And it seems like Pelatiel really loves her. He's going to treat her right. Well, thank goodness, finally, after all this being jerked around, somebody's going to take care of her. And so it seems like he really loves her, but meanwhile, as we advance in the story a little bit, we see David who is advancing over Saul's kingdom. He's gradually taking more and more power, more and more influence. But he can't seem to get influence over those northern tribes. You see, they're still loyal to Saul and Saul's family line. How is David going to sway opinion? He starts thinking, what can I do to sway these people who really have a heart for Saul and his family? He meets with some of Saul's people, he's negotiating, and he says, I got it. If I was married into the family, that might get me some political sway with these other people. Bring me Saul's daughter. Bring me that woman that I married the first time. I want her fair and square with that whole contest with the big bag and everything. I want her fair and square. She's mine. Bring me Saul's daughter. He does not say, bring me Michal, my first love. The woman who I wrongly abandoned, I have come back to her to save the day and snatch her out of the clutches of the enemy. No. He doesn't even say her by name. Bring me Saul's daughter. He says her by way of what she is to him as a political pawn. Bring me this woman that will give me some power. It's not about love. It's not about returning to her. It's about consolidating his power over the northern tribes. She's a means to an end. So, her brother, he probably just wants to see all of this go away. He's tired of dealing with it. He kidnaps her. Kidnaps her during the night and takes her to David and says, here you go, marry her, let's be done with this. Meanwhile, her captors are being pursued by Paltiel, who is chasing after them. When we just imagine he's running behind them, maybe he's on horseback, he's got tears in his eyes. He loves this woman, he's been good to her. And she's crying too, because she's finally found someone to love her, and now she's being snatched away by the guy who didn't show her love in the first place. And now she is going back to live with him. Lucky number 7. Or number 1, I guess, considering how you look at it, of his harem. So, as we fast forward in the story, we see this great parade that's going to happen. There's this great party that's going to happen. You see, there's the Ark of the Covenant that has been the instance of a symbol of God's presence among men.
Yes.
And you can't touch the Ark of the Covenant. You see, this one time they were trying to carry it on these 10-foot poles, and they're carrying these poles, and somebody thinks it's going to drop, so they go try to catch it. And at that moment, as soon as their hand makes contact, they die and drop to the ground. So David, when he saw that, he said, oh, I don't want that in my house. I'm liable to get up and go to the bathroom, stumble into it, and die. Let's put it in one of the soldiers' house, which, don't you feel great if you're that soldier? Yes, it's beautiful to look at, but I'm scared to death. Let's just wall off this ring when I go in here. So they kind of do a test. They put it in this guy's house. They say, if he doesn't die over a period of time, we'll know it's safe to bring back the capital. So some time has passed, and they said, we're going to bring back the Ark of the Covenant to the capital. And so, not only is this a symbol of God's presence among his people, but is a symbol that he hasn't stricken David dead. He must verify his kingdom. So it's kind of like God giving approval of David to bring the Ark of the Covenant back into the capital. And so they do this thing as an honor to God, but it's also meant for a great party, where they're going down the street and they take 6 steps. And after they take 6 steps, they gently set the ark down and they slay an ox and a calf. What do they do with all that meat? Barbecue. So they're having singing and dancing and barbecue in the streets. That's a good party. And David is dancing in the streets. And he is just having a ball, and everybody's like, yeah, David, we're singing songs about him. Like, look at what David has done. He's brought the Ark of the Covenant back. This is awesome. Yay, David. David is awesome. He does no wrong. Meanwhile, Michal is up there in the window, looking out. Oh, y'all don't know like I do. Oh, that dirtbag. That guy that abandoned me. Jerked me around for years. Oh, I can sing a song about him, but I can't repeat it. She's looking down. This woman who stood at one window and with boldness professed her claim of love for him. Her heart was overflowing for love for David. Now she's standing in another window, and her heart is just sore with bitterness, hatred, with disgust at this guy who has done all this to her. He's out here having a party. Oh, and by the way, he's dancing around in his underwear. You see, he's wearing a linen ephod, which would be an undergarment we consider underwear. If you picture a skirt or a kilt, and if you danced and you twirled, what would happen to that? It would kind of go up in the air. I'm not trying to be graphic, this is just what happens in the story. that he's wearing nothing but that, and he's dancing in the streets, and there's all these maidservants, all these women lining up both, and they're enjoying the celebration. And so Michal, she looks down here, says, this guy who ran off on me, married a couple women, got 4 more, came back and stole me from the only person that treated me right. Now, here he is, dancing half naked in front of all these women. Now, in David's defense, what he is trying to do in that moment, as he has taken off his kingly robes, is to show that he is humble before God, that he is exposed before God, that he is a nobody before God. That's what he's going for. But what Michal sees is that scumbag of his old ways. And you can't blame her for thinking that. I mean, if David had a cell phone, Michal would be going through it going, who's Abigail? She has every reason to doubt what he's doing. And so, earlier in the story, she boldly proclaimed her love, and it was kind of risky. Now she's going to go out into the street and boldly proclaim something else. She's been stuck up in the house watching all this stuff, not really feeling love and joy and adoration for David like everyone else is. He gets out in front of the house. He's going to go and bless the house. And one of David's wives is going to come down here and have a big old fight with the king in front of everybody. And it's recorded in 2 Samuel chapter 6, starting with verse 20. When David returned home to bless his household, Michal, daughter of Saul, came up to meet him and said, "How the king of Israel has distinguished himself today, going around half naked in full view of the slave girls of his servants, as any vulgar fellow would." David said to Michal, "It was before the Lord, who chose me rather than your father or anyone from his house, when he appointed me ruler over the Lord's people Israel. I will celebrate before the Lord. I will become even more undignified than this, and I will be humiliated in my own eyes. But by these slave girls you spoke of, I will be held in honor." And Michal, daughter of Saul, had no children to the day of her death. Let's just break this passage down a little bit. Michal is saying, David, you're the king. You should be more dignified than this. You should be more distinguished than this, instead of dancing around vulgar in front of all these women. And David's response cuts right back to the bone. Haven't we found that the people you love the most can say the most cutting things to you? They can hit those buttons and those nerves nobody else knows about. David's response here cuts straight to the bone a few times. He says, "God chose me over your father." He's just her name. He says, "God chose me over anyone from your father's house." That could be an insult to her whole family, everybody. He says, "At least these slave girls over here will honor me." Ouch. That doesn't seem powerful. And then he doesn't have any kids by her. He denies her any kids. He's yanked her around back and forth. Then he decides, I'm not going to give her any children. And especially in that day and time, for a woman not having children, it would be, does God have something against this person? Does God not love her? Secondly, does her husband not love her? And it would seem that he doesn't. He's used her as a pawn, and then he's denied her any children. And there's irony, too, in what he says here. When he says, I'll be even more undignified than this. Because what David means there is, I will become more humble and humiliated before God, as a sort of way of saying I am nothing without him. What ends up happening when we're talking about undignified is right after this, he goes and he has an affair with Bathsheba. He kills her husband to cover it up. It's very undignified, when we say. So we see the irony in what he is saying, what he means by that versus what actually happens and what it comes to mean. Now we look at Michal, at her story. We can understand why she would be bitter. Goodness, wouldn't anybody be bitter at that? We can understand why it would be really hard to forgive David what he's done. And yet, the Bible commands us to forgive others. When we look at this story and say, how? How could you forgive somebody who did you so wrong, so dirty, in so many ways over so many years? How could you forgive somebody like that? Surely you don't mean forgive somebody like that. But the Bible talks about us forgiving other people, and it does not stipulate the conditions under which we can forgive them. It doesn't say forgive them if you feel like it, only if you feel like it. It says forgive them if their positives outweigh their negatives. In fact, when Jesus was asked by Peter, how many times should I forgive somebody? He gives an answer that basically means perfection times perfection. Forgive that person a perfect amount of times, an infinite amount of times. Not putting a number on it, not putting a qualitative response on it, not a form they got to fill out. You just forgive them. Whether they deserve it or not. David didn't deserve it. David clearly didn't deserve forgiveness. If this was an episode of Judge Judy or a divorce court or anything like that, we'd be railing against him. Get him! He's a bad dude. David does not come off looking good in this story. We know that he is a man after God's own heart, and God uses him in mighty ways. But in this story, oh, David, ooh, man. It's one of the things I love about the Bible. The Bible is so honest. Other religions will just kind of make up something to make their heroes look great in all situations. When we look at the Bible, we say, ooh, this gets dirty, this gets raw. This is just truth. It's just truth laid out there. And it does not look good for David. But there's hope for us, because if God can use David, he can use anyone. But that is a whole other message. I wonder, what would be different about this story when we come to the second window, when she's looking out at the parade, she's feeling all this hate, this anger, this bitterness towards David? What would have been different in this story had she forgiven David at some point? Instead of letting it fester up, eat away at her, ruin her life, ruin her days, ruin her future, what would it have been like if she had forgiven David? Again, I'm not saying he deserves it. Don't look at this and say, well, she'd just be walked all over. Yeah, she has been walked all over. I'm not saying it's okay. But what would have changed about this story had she forgiven David? And I know what you probably want me to say is, well, if she forgave him, then he would have changed his ways. Maybe. Maybe. Sometimes we forgive somebody, and that leads them to repentance. Sometimes when we forgive somebody, they are so humbled by that, say, I can't believe I sinned against this saint. Here I am being ugly, and they're being sweet. And it is really hard for me to keep on doing them this wrong because I feel convicted because of the way they're responding. Sometimes that works. Sometimes you having such a good attitude can change that other person's attitude. But I'm not going to lie to you and say that's a guarantee. Sometimes you forgive somebody, and they don't change. And looking at the pattern of behavior, 6 women, that's not just a whoops. 6 other wives. Looking at the pattern of behavior, David does not seem repentant about any of this. Now we know from the book of Psalms, David is really good about seeing his flaws and repenting. Over and over again in the Psalms, David says to God, I messed up. Here's what I did. I did wrong. I need your help to get back on the right path. We see him do it. We know David is capable of admitting his faults and asking God to bring him to a place of repentance, to put him on the right path, and go forth and do great things. We know David is capable of doing that. Nowhere in this story do we see him go before Michal, take that request to God about Michal and say, God, I messed up. Michal, I messed up. Can you please forgive me? I have treated you like dirt. I don't see how I didn't see it before. I'm convicted about this. Would you forgive me? And nowhere do we see him asking for forgiveness. Nowhere do we see him wanting to turn and repent of his behavior. After this, he keeps on doing it. He has an affair with Bathsheba. So he has not seemed to learn his lesson, at least up to this point. Maybe later, when we talk about his repentance in the Psalms, we don't always know what he's repenting from. There's that chance that maybe when he's repenting before God, he's saying, you know my past. You know what all I've done. Maybe. But there's nothing that explicitly tells us that he tried to make good with Michal. To the contrary, we know that he denied her any children. It seemed like there was a grudge going for a very long time. See, forgiveness is not a guarantee that the other person will repent. Forgiveness is not a guarantee that all of your circumstances will change. Forgiveness is not always easy. If it was easy, we'd all forgive each other all the time. I'd love to turn on the news and see Congress and the Senate getting along good. They did each other wrong in the past, but everybody just hugged it out. It was awesome. I would love to know that there just wasn't that vitriol and that fighting that we all forgave. If it was easy, we'd all just do it. Forgiveness is not always easy. Sometimes it's really difficult. Forgiveness does not mean you've forgotten what happened. Forgiveness does not mean that you've made excuses for it and you feel pretty good about it. Forgiveness means you are not going to let your past control your future. You're not going to let that situation, you're not going to let that person dictate how you are going forward. Forgiveness can be between you and them and God, but forgiveness is not all about that other person. It's saying, I'm not going to bear that burden. Sometimes we have this perceived right to get even. It is my right to make them pay. Officers, turn your back. You don't want to see this. Nobody needs to be a witness to this. You want to get back, you want to get even, but physically or emotionally or some other way, you want to get back at that person for whatever they did that was wrong to you. Forgiveness says, I give up my right to get even. In the eyes of man, we have every right to make them pay. But in the eyes of God, He says, no. You're called to forgive. Say, God, they did me wrong. You did me wrong too. And while we were still sinners, Christ died on the cross for us. And so if He died on the cross for us, who are we to say, well, I know you sinned against God and He forgave you, but sins against me are a bigger deal than sins against God. I know it's not a big deal for God to forgive you, but it will be a big deal for me to forgive you. Who are we to say that we are a greater judge than God? That trespassing, crossing the line against us, is a bigger deal than it is with God. That God gives forgiveness, but I don't have to because I stand way up here. God calls us to forgive. He doesn't put qualifiers on it. He just says forgive. Amen. I don't know who you might need to forgive this morning. I don't know what's happened to you, what's been done to you, that you might need to forgive somebody this morning. And I'm not trying to act like you shouldn't feel angry, sad, or upset for whatever's been done to you. It's natural to feel hurt. It's natural to struggle. It is natural to have some emotions. But what I am saying is that you will be more free to experience joy if you'll take that off of your back and put it on the back of Jesus, who nails it to that cross and takes it up to Mount Calvary. Amen. I don't know if you've ever been so angry that you felt like, I'm so angry I could kill somebody. You know, you've ever felt like that. And you say, yeah, I didn't act on it, but have you ever been so angry you say, I could just kill somebody right now? Somebody needs to pay for this. If you ever hear about these methods of medieval torture, and they're stretching people out with wheels and crushing them and stuff, you say, yeah, that sounds about right. I'd love to do that to my enemies. Somebody needs to pay. Someone needs to suffer in the most physically excruciating and longest duration way for what has been done to me. And if you really think about it, they have. Somebody has. The crucifixion was the most painful thing you could do to somebody. But in addition to that, Jesus was beaten with a whip. He had the hair pulled off of his face. He was spit on. He was beaten multiple times on his way to the cross. And then he was crucified on that cross. Someone has suffered for what you've gone through. Someone suffered for your sins to be forgiven. But they also suffered for that other person's sins to be forgiven too. And we can't nullify that. Much as we might want to. Much as we might want to say, I can't forgive them. But God forgave us. The example that you set by your forgiveness might encourage that other person to repent. But it might not. I can just tell you that forgiveness is not just for them, it's for you as well. You may have stood by a lot of windows waiting for love to return to you. But I tell you this morning that Jesus is standing right outside the door knocking. And won't you let him in? If you'd like to pray over some situation where you need to forgive someone, I'd love to pray with you. If you need to learn to forgive yourself, we can talk about that too. If you need to let go of some bitterness, some hurt, and be ready to show love and forgiveness, this altar is open. However the Lord leads you, won't you please come forward as we sing the songs.